Hello everyone, it's Mary Rose here from Stitch Bliss Corner. Thanks for dropping by. I thought I'd start with this. Yes, Mount Everest. And you have base camp, camp 1, camp 2, camp 3, camp 4, and then the summit. And camp 4 is where you need the oxygen to get to the top, because that's the death zone. I mean, between 3 and 4 you might need it as well. I'm not sure about that. Okay. So people who climb Mount Everest, successfully anyway, they need to prepare, and they have to prepare for months and months ahead. They have to have the right equipment, they have to have the right guides, they have to make sure they've got all the right supplies, and when they reach base camp, they've already hiked for quite some way to get there. And they say you could get to base camp very quickly by helicopter, but most people walk there if they want to go to the summit, because it's the start of acclimatizing themselves to the rarefied air, which takes weeks and weeks. And in base camp they practice going up and down, climbing different techniques, all the things required for success. They can't just climb out of bed and think, oh, I'll hop on a plane and within a couple of days I'll be at the top. And I think that's when you think of Hades, for example. They have to be the Mount Everest of the cross-stitch world, don't they? And so when you're doing a large project, and I'm embarking on one myself, it's not a Hade, but it's pretty big, for me anyway, and it's full coverage. You have to prepare for it, you know. So, and I've seen people on Flosstube say they don't like gridding, they just want to get stuck straight into their project, and I understand that, because the enthusiasm of it, it's like cabin fever. You just want to get going. But by the same token, if you do a lot of preparation first, it saves time later on, it gives you more chance of success, and less frogging. And I mean, who wants to frog? So I know everyone has their different method of how they approach a big project, and I just thought I'd go through my way that I do it. Now, first of all, before I'll show you what I'm doing. I'll be doing this one, and later on, as I go through, I'll mention more about that particular artist and what his motivations were. Yes, anyway, so the first thing I do, I don't use Q snaps or frames or anything like that. I use a ring or a hoop. Let's take it off. This one like that, and one of these, which is a little bean bag, really. It's got little bean bags inside it. I sit that on my lap, and then I have my hoop. Sit that on my lap, have my hoop, and it sort of sits so that I can work with two hands if I want, or one hand. I can just suit myself. As long as I've got my leg crossed, it's high enough for me to be able to put one hand under the fabric and one over. So I don't know, I just enjoy stitching that way and always have done. So I've got my beanbag on my lap, I've got my hoop, and then I have my gridding, which I do myself. There's my grids. And as you can see, it's quite a big, it will be quite a big project. This one was printed off, when you get it off the internet and you print it out, you buy it that way. And when I got all my sheets of the symbols to show you how to put it together, how to stitch it, I got 2 sets and I glued the entire project, well, sticky tape, the whole project together, so that I have a complete picture of what I'm doing, so that I can always reference it back, whichever part I'm working on. I can have a look at the completed chart to orientate myself. And plus, it acts as a goal. You see it, it's your Mount Everest, that if you've got it all together to look at, and all the squares, you know exactly what square you're working on, and because you've gridded. And that means if you get a bit bored with this, I always start in the middle, but if I get a bit bored with it, theoretically, I could go and work on any other part of it. But I always start in the middle. So really that doesn't mean a great deal at the moment. How have I got that? Oh no, that's a perfect example here. I always mark the top with something, because you always think, oh, why would you do that? Because you'd always know which was the top and which was the bottom. But in the early stages, it's not always apparent. Not for the likes of me, anyway. So I already had that upside down. So that's the right way up now. Right, and that part is the lower part of his arm and some of his blanket that's coming down, or his, quite know how he's got that round him at this stage. And you might be thinking, what's that white that she's got on there? Just here. Well, that's some white thread that if I get a bit lost in there with all the confetti and all the other things, because I cut away my gridding as I go, and in spite of that at times it can be very easy to get a bit lost, but because I've got my gridding there, I can just do some stitching over the top, just temporary, to reorientate myself, which is what I've done there. And then I can just, remove that. So it's looking a bit confused at the moment, but I'm hoping that that will right itself. Now we've done the beanbag, the hoop, the gridding, and now we come to the threads. Now I do a combination of cross country and just working within my squares, so it's a bit of both. And the brilliance of having gridding is that you can watch TV while you're stitching. You notice pretty quickly where you go wrong, if you go wrong. And because I do like to either watch television or Flosstube, mostly Flosstube these days, while I'm stitching. And I can put it down and come back and I know exactly where I am. I'm not counting endlessly. And if I was a bit more, I mean, I'm sure for some stitches they're fine with the counting. They have no problem. But I can literally count something 3 times and get a different result every time. Mathematics is just not me. So I have to go to great lengths in order to not be the queen of frogging to try and avoid that particular thing happening. So in this particular project there are around 120 threads or colours. They're all here. And I think for some stitchers, they may have projects in their cupboards that they've seen them on the internet and bought them, or, you know, and then realised just the mammoth project that they've thinking of undertaking, and just put it away because it's all too daunting. But I think if you take it apart and plan it as though you were going up a mountain, then it will be easier, you know. So, for example, this particular one, I won't show any of the numbers of the colours, but I always get cards of cardboard, and I have a little hole punch, and I punch all my holes, and then I go in order of the number. So from 1 to 3, 1 to 30, 30 to 60 and so on, whatever number there is between those. So it's all in order from 1 to 3,000 and whatever of the colours that I have. So I always know where it is. So, you know, for example, if I've got between, here I've got between, say, 500 and 600, well, all the colours that are required for my project within that range I have in order. So that's the first thing I do. So I've got all my colours all in numerical order. That's what I'm trying to say, finally. And then once I've done that, I have a look at all the blended colours. And for this particular project, there are only 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, about 13 colours that aren't blended. All the others are blended. So, I shouldn't have showed that, but I suppose it'd be very hard to to work it out from that. But you see, what I've done is I have cut all my threads pretty much the same length on originally, so that when I put the two colours together, they are roughly the same length. So that's a blended thread I have there that is the same length. And then I have the number of both threads written. So if it's 640 whatever with 3,000 and whatever, those two will be together there. And then for added security for myself, I do a very small picture of the symbol there. So I'll just cover that. Make sure the colour's up there. Oh, that's a bad symbol, just a minute. Right, here's one. So, get it right in the end. So, for example, there's a symbol there, and there's the number for it, so that it's a fail-safe thing, so that if I go to the symbol on my chart and I look at the card that I have, the symbol should match up to the blended thread that I'm getting. And some of the symbols are very similar to each other. So if you have a pictorial as well as a numerical key to go by on your card, it just serves to be an extra fail-safe for you so that you don't make a mistake, especially if you're watching Flosstube or whatever you might be doing while you're stitching. Was there anything else I wanted to say on this topic? I'm sure there are plenty of people that have their methods, but I just thought I'd throw that one out there because I don't, as I say, I don't use Q-snaps or a frame or anything. For me, stitching is, it's a gentle art, and having a little hoop in your lap, and you can relax if you've done all the hard work to begin with. And most Everest mountaineers that are successful say that it's because of the preparation, that it was frustrating having to wait. It was frustrating being in base camp for weeks and weeks at a time, doing so many practice runs. But at the same time, if you want to be successful with it, then you sort of do have to put the hard yards in for that. Try to avoid the instant gratification. And there was something else I was going to say, and I think it's gone. Oh, I remember now. Just as a final point, whatever project you're doing, it's a bit like when you have your dinner or your dessert and you're leaving the last nice bit to the end so you can really savour it. That's another thing to do when you're doing a big project. Don't do the best bit first, because then the rest becomes a drudgery to a degree. Not, you know what I mean. Whereas if you're working towards the pinnacle, towards the summit of your achievement, then you've always got that to look forward to. I mean, if you're stitching an animal, for example, leave his eyes till last, or some part of the picture that you're looking forward to, because that spurs you on. You know, I mean, as I say, with mine, with this one, I'm starting in the middle. And most likely, for me, I will leave his face until last. But after that, I'll probably do the background before I do his face. But that'll be okay because I'll be looking forward to his face. That's what I'm trying to say. And if you do that, I think you've got much better chance of success. I mean, if you could go to Mount Everest and get on there halfway up, you know, you might get to the top, but you might not too, because you won't be used to the atmosphere and you won't be motivated in the same way as if you went there months beforehand and felt that it was a huge achievement to you. I think that's all. So I hope there are a few little tips in there for you, and I hope it wasn't too confusing, because I'm not particularly good at explaining things. And until next time, happy stitching. Bye.